thank you again for your time today. Nye McGee here with EUR Web. I know we're gathered to speak about your very exciting project, Wade in the Water, a journey into Black surfing and aquatic culture. So, of course, I want to kick things off by asking you, clearly this project, this documentary, highlights a very rich and often overlooked history of Black surfing. So, what motivated you to bring this story to the forefront now?
That's a really good question. So this documentary came to be post Black Lives Matter, the death of George Floyd. And the tipping point was when my son, who was 15-year-old, came up to me and asked me a specific question. And that was, why are they killing us? And honestly, I couldn't answer it. I just didn't have the answers. But, we've all felt this pain building up until that moment. And as a creative person, I felt like I needed to tell a story that's empowering, spiritual, uplifting. And I've been a surfer for years and years and years. I knew this lovely community in Southern California. I knew the rich history. And I used Wade in the Water really as a means, as a metaphor to talk about these things that we've dealt with and we're dealing with, we continue to deal with. And so that was really the impetus of Wade in the Water. And that led to creating, finding, these amazing stories about us, our connection to the ocean, the 1,000-year-old history, the 1640 first account of surfing in Africa. So all of that is within Wade in the Water.
And so, were there any specific individuals or stories that moved that are highlighted in this project that moved you or inspired you during the making of this documentary?
It's hard to pick one or two. There's so many stories, right? The one that is the hook is the 1640 account, which says that in 1640, Michael Hemerson, a German traveler, was traveling through Ghana and he sees this mother who's teaching her son to surf. At that point, he didn't describe it as surfing. And all of this comes from Professor Kevin Dawson, who's this professor that's been doing the research for over 10 years. And that story is so powerful because when you think of surf culture, you think of it as Hawaii, Southern California, white guy, blonde hair, blue eye, right? It changes that narrative. It says that we were actually out there surfing. Our mothers were teaching us how to surf. And that I think is the most powerful story. And then when you get to the challenges of losing this connection to the ocean, Allison Jefferson Rose um, talks about the issues post Jim Crow era or during Jim Crow era, what was happening in Southern California, which is, an example is Bruce's Beach, how an African American business was shut down using eminent domain. And to me, that story reflects what has happened to us. That's how we lost our connection to the ocean and beach and being part of that culture, because there are so many incidents that she talks about where individuals were removed or businesses were closed. Imagine if those businesses were still open and those families were around, right? The culture would be completely different, as in basketball, music, you name it, right? We will go in there and create our own culture. So I think those two stories are powerful. And then, you have individual stories like Nick Gabaldon, the first documented Black surfer. There's a rich story about him. Sharon Schaefer, who was the first Black pro surfer. Her story is amazing. And then you have individual stories of up and coming, surfing clubs like Black Surfers Collective. You have Jessa, who started just a club for BIPOC community, just specifically for women to come out and reconnect to the ocean. So I can go on and on and on, but watch the documentary on Comcast, Black Experience on Xfinity, and you can learn all of it.
Okay, so wait, speaking of individual stories, like you just mentioned, your personal connection to surfing. So tell us a little bit more about how your connection to the surfing community influenced this project.
That's a good question. So I'm originally from Ethiopia. When I came to America, I didn't know how to swim. So the first task was to learn how to swim. I lived close to the beach, and then ended up learning how to surf. Eventually, I moved to Southern California to learn how, to go to school at Cal State Long Beach. And when I came here, up to that moment, I would see one or two people out surfing that looked like me, that, were Black, and we would nod, of course, and acknowledge each other. But it was in 2014 when Black Surfers Collective had their first event, which was to commemorate Nick Gabaldon. And I went there and I just saw a sea of Black people. It's such a powerful image, to see yourself reflected on the beach on something that you love and everyone doing it. That was my beginning of, understanding the power of surfing and being part of a community, a Black community. Up to that moment, I would see a bunch of white surfers and, they were great, great friends. I surfed with them and everything. But it's different when you see your people, doing the thing that you love that you're told is not part of your culture. And eventually, when I made Wade in the Water, it was basically, that metaphorical reflecting like, no, this is part of our culture. Join us. This is my first documentary that I've made. I work in advertising. And in advertising, I do 30-second spots as a creative, but never done a long feature film documentary. So this has been an amazing experience, passion project, impactful project. So yeah.
So what did you find most rewarding about this filmmaking process for this particular project?
The most rewarding part of this project is really the screenings. So every screening ends with a Q&A session. And that is when I see the true impact of this film. When people share their stories, how they never learned how to surf because they were told they didn't know how to swim, or they weren't part of that culture, or their parents held them back. Every event that I go and show, there's a man or woman that stands up and shares that story. And that I would say is the most powerful moment of this film and the impactful moment of this film.
So, are you finding with these Q&A sessions that Black people particularly are surprised that there's a culture of Black surfers?
I mean, it's a global, phenomenon. Like you can go anywhere in the world, you'll find Black surfers. For the audience, for the African American audience specifically, it ranges, right? You have, you know, individuals that have learned how to swim. They come from middle or well-to-do families that their parents have taught them how to swim, and they know the culture and so forth. And then you have a percentage of people who really have not connected to aquatic culture and swimming for many reasons, right? And those individuals are the ones who would speak up and really share the moment they saw this film has really triggered something or changed something in their life. The moment that they've lost this connection needs to be reconnected. Now, what's interesting is I've shown this film several times, like, for example, in Los Angeles, and I would see the same people show up the second, third time. And just to hear from them, hey, David, I just started to swim, or I've begun surfing. That is so powerful, for you to create something and see the impact of it in a matter of a couple months. And this was never part of, like, when you think of creating a documentary, you don't think about it. But really, it's that the end result of, of a narrative of telling a story, which is part of humans, of who we are as humans, how much of an impact that has on an individual. And then, that triggers another family members. It changes the trajectory of that family. Aquatic culture becomes part of their life, and that reconnects them back to their roots. I think that's the power of this.
I'm listening to you share these testimonies and I'm reminded of all the times I've attempted to learn how to swim and have failed. I have this strange fear of water. I don't know how to swim. I've tried to take swimming lessons. I'm convinced that I died drowning in a previous life and I'm just having like it's
Mhm.
imprinted in my spirit. It's something about the water. I'm drawn to the water, but I'm so deathly afraid of the water. It's so odd. Maybe this documentary will be a cure. But on that note, how do you hope Wade in the Water will impact the perception of diversity in surfing and other aquatic sports?
So yeah, I hope, it questions the surf industry, right? That's who you want to impact, because there is really a small percentage of representation of surfers that are sponsored, even individuals that represent the brand, just as a cultural means. They're not even competing; they're wearing the clothing and so forth. So I hope they watch this documentary and remember to sponsor more Spencer and more surfers, African American surfers, to be part of the culture. When you look at Southern California, you have events like a Great Day in the Stoke where all the Black surfers around the world come here and compete. It's happening in September 16 this year in Huntington Beach. They should really be part of that culture, be inclusive of that culture. There is, the cultural benefit that we would bring and change and evolve this surfing culture as we know, and also there's economic benefit, right, for the brands. And then at the same time, I think for us as Black people, by brands supporting us in return, we'll end up supporting them. As we have with you talk about Nike, Adidas, and everything. We are the ones who change those brands. We are the ones who spend the money on those brands. So I think it's important, for these brands to really recognize Black culture and context of Black surfing.
What messages do you want audiences to kind of take away, or at the very least, what do you hope to leave them talking about, among their family and friends and even their children who might be scared of swimming like me? What do you hope to leave them talking about after they watch Wade in the Water?
What I want people to take away at the end, watching Wade in the Water, is really to inspire them to be the next generation of Black surfers. Because it's in context of surfing and aquatic culture. You have a lot of young people that are in the coastlines. And remember, now you have wave pools that are opening up, even one in Virginia Beach. Pharrell is opening up that one up. So the culture is changing and there are so many opportunities. Of course, you have to learn how to swim first. But the takeaway for Wade in the Water is, connecting to surfing for multiple reasons. Surfing really has a therapeutical quality to it. There's a spiritual connection that you need to connect to back to Africa, and it does that. There's ways of you can use surfing for economical benefits and so forth if you really dive into it. So it's a new culture. It's an opportunity for you to come in and change that culture or be part of that culture. Those are the things I want people to take away from Wade in the Water.
David, and what are you most excited about viewers experiencing? I mean, I know there's a lot to digest and unpack, right? From testimonies and history and like the contemporary aspect of surfing and Black surfing. What are you most excited about viewers kind of experiencing when they unpack this documentary?
As you indicated, there's multiple chapters in there. If there's one thing you want to take away from Wade in the Water is the historical significance and looking at Professor Kevin Dawson and historical facts. These are all facts. They are not, made up. That surfing existed in Africa 1,000 years back. The 1640 account, the first written account of surfing in Africa. That's the thing you want to take away because that's what inspires you to believe this is part of your culture. This is who you are. That leads you to be inspired to learn how to surf or learn how to swim.
How did you approach the task of incorporating both historical and contemporary perspectives?
So it began with the historical fact, but then again, there's so much, like you said, there's the spiritual, there's the legacy, there's the future, there's the spiritual connection. I will have to give credit to my editor because as I was asking people the questions, the way I approached the narrative was I had specific questions to ask everyone about the legacy, the spirituality, if they knew about the 1640 account, and also what is their how do they see the future in front of them. And within those questions, I wasn't really too specific about getting those answers. The way I approached it was like, I'll start a conversation with you. And if you say something that's quite interesting, I'll dive deep into that. And we'll just have a really interesting conversation. So it's beyond the script. It's very, it's like jazz, it's improvisational. And that really led to people open up and share about, their lives, their spiritual connection, what they see the future of surfing or legacy, talking about some of the legendary surfers. And then when it came to putting it together, we were trying different ways to put it together. As you said, it's quite difficult. There's so many stories and so many individuals. My editor, Tafari, basically said, what if we broke them into chapters? Because the way you've interviewed these individuals, there are specific chapters. And if we do that, it would make it quite easy. Now it's just a matter, where do you start? Do you start with spirituality? Do you start with, history? So at the end, we began with history, ended with, the future of surfing. So it was a great, bookend for someone to really grasp the story and understand it.
What role do you see Wade in the Water playing in the broader conversation about representation and inclusion in sports and media?
So in terms of representation and inclusion, I mean, look at the Olympics. How many brothers and sisters were into swimming aquatic culture? It's already impacting culture. It's just a matter of time before surfing becomes, recognized you know, as everything else, gymnastics, tennis, you name it, all the sisters that are killing it. It's a matter of time before there's a black male or female surfer that's going to be in the forefront. So that inclusion has to start now. That representations of brand has to start now, not at the tail end. So in my opinion, that's going to happen fairly soon. I mean, 2028 is coming right around the corner. And I think it's important for brands and individuals to recognize that this is one of the sports that are sort of left behind when it comes to being impacted by our culture. And when we come in and impact the culture, it's going to change for the good. So that's what I'm looking forward to.
Listen, this whole time during this entire conversation, I was thinking in my mind, we need a black surfing event in the Olympics, but no, they won't let that happen because we'll come in and we'll just shut it
Hey,
down. There will be no other competitors because when we take over, it's
you
like,
know it's gonna happen. It's just a matter of time. You know it's
yes,
gonna happen. So it's an opportunity for grabs. That's the way I see it. It's like if you have a young person, imagine this girl who's gonna watch this documentary and she's inspired to learn how to swim or knows how to swim and goes out, her family takes her out, and a community comes behind her, a brand comes behind her, she will change the culture, you know? There isn't really a lot of sports left. We're talking in terms of context of sport, but then again, the power of sport is it inspires us, it connects us, it makes us human, right? But the thing about black athletes is when they achieve that, they change culture, they change lives, they change the world. So that moment I look forward to.